Are your teens thinking about college? Are you thinking about how your kids will navigate the college admissions road? Welcome to Homeschool Yourself. I'm your host, Delina. If there's one thing that's changed in the world since I was a teen, well, besides smartphones, the internet, and everything. But seriously, getting into college, I had no idea how much it changed. There's been a world of change, and this is an area where those of us with teens need to homeschool ourselves. If your teen's future includes college, this is an area where we have to learn a lot. And guys, it's a lot. I invited a college admissions coach to talk to us about everything that's different in college admissions and everything that we need to be thinking about in order to coach our kids into college. Take a listen. There's valuable information here. Hi, Shaquita. Welcome to Homeschool Yourself. I would love it if you would introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Shaquita Basileo. I am a tutor, educator, and college admissions coach. I am a proud graduate of Florida A&M University and Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. I've had about 10 years of experience doing admissions consulting and support. I started out doing graduate school, business school admissions consulting, which was a paid gig. And now I work to support families, underrepresented minorities, young people in their quest to be accepted to the college of their dreams.
Awesome. I love that. Now, tell me, way back when, in the 1900s, when we went to college, like the landscape has changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. So tell me what are some of the things that people our age, maybe they didn't go to college or maybe they went to college way back when we did. What are some of the ways that they're going to find this space different than they are used to?
Completely different. So yes, ours was so simple, right? We took the SAT, the ACT, or the PSAT, and then all of a sudden brochures just showed up at our house, and we picked the one that looked like it was in the warm climate, and said, that's where I'm going to school, right? And it was pretty simple and straightforward. And now it is far more competitive. When we applied for school, we applied primarily senior year. I remember it was December, January when I was submitting college applications. Now admissions happen earlier in the cycle, end of junior year, that summer between junior and senior year. And truthfully, by the time you get to November, you're almost too late. The state schools that used to be, the most reliable schools where, that was your backup plan, right? Those are now truly competitive. And there's several reasons for that. The first one that comes to my mind is scholarship offerings. So you have states like Louisiana and Georgia and Florida who have really made some efforts to keep their talent in state and not lose them, right? So they say, you get a 21 or 22 or 23 on your on your ACT, or, a certain score on your SAT, and you're guaranteed in-state tuition coverage. Wow. And so there's no reason for those students to leave, but now all those students are competing for the state schools, and that's really changed the game. The other thing is that the pot of scholarship money is smaller, and it goes sooner, and it goes truly early. And the best example I give for that is my own alma mater. And when I went to FAMU, I got my scholarship at school. Actually, I wasn't even at school the day I was given my scholarship. My guidance counselor put my name in a pot, and I was one of the students who met the requirements for GPA and SAT to get a full ride to FAMU. Now I would not qualify for that scholarship. The GPA requirement has increased, so I would not be eligible. There's that, but also I had a young lady who was really interested in going to FAMU, and I called in September thinking we're plenty early for her to get scholarship money. And the woman in admissions told me she needs to be accepted to the university by mid-October in order to be considered for scholarships. That was accepted, not applying, accepted. Wow. And so we have to shift our mindset that admissions does not happen during your senior year. And in truth, preparing for college admissions starts freshman year of college. And we need to be
Of high
ready
school.
to go. Yes,
High
we
school,
start with
right?
high school.
Yeah.
Yes. We need to be ready to go at the end of junior year, that we're submitting applications, essays are drafted, recommendations are in hand. It's truly, the timeline has truly shifted, and the competitive nature of the state schools is very different now than what we're used to.
Wow. I'm going to try not to have a panic attack during this interview because my son is a junior. And yes, I'm just going to take it slow. Take deep breaths. Yeah, so competitiveness and the timeline has shifted. Mm-hmm. And what about this I keep saying landscape, but this industry that has cropped up around college admissions?
Yeah. So as parents have become busier, as we're already stressed, right? You just mentioned try not to have a panic attack, right? We've all the other things that are already on our plates. This field of college admissions consulting has become more prominent, kind of seizing on that opportunity to take the work off the plate of parents and families to be able to guide them through this process that's a little bit rougher and more difficult than what we remember or know about. And so to be very honest, there's different ways that college admissions consultants and guidance pops up. And the other thing I want to add to that too is the other reason is that and I mentioned my guidance counselor was the one who got my scholarship for me and helped me. We have a shortage of guidance counselors in the schools.
Yeah.
Right. And they are still dealing with post-COVID trauma and the trauma that was already there. Right. They're still trying to help students just graduate through high school or get kids fed or deal with mental health challenges, that they don't have the capacity to be able to give students the college guidance that we used to be able to get to back in, a long time ago. And so these college admissions
a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. Wait, right? When we were writing applications on rocks. So these admissions consultants, they kind of popped up to fill the void for families. And they show up in different ways. There are paid consultants who you can expect to pay about $10,000 to be able to guide your child through crafting essays, determining who's the right person for their recommendations, creating their list of activities or their resume, prepping them for interviews. And so that's where you've seen them kind of try to fill in that void. But there's other ways to get support that don't have to look like $10,000, right? So there are some other places. There are some consulting groups that will do, just have like a Facebook private group where you may pay a small fee to get in and get that access or get some structure around your college admissions process, but also connect to other parents. And then let's not forget that there are free communities that are on Facebook. I know there's one that's HBCU Scholarship, and that's a great parent community where it's free. And sometimes you just listening to other parents or seeing what other parents are going through and students are experiencing, the schools that they are having, great contact with, or schools that are non-responsive, that's helping you be able to build kind of that information, find out about, admissions fair, college admissions fairs or virtual events or even local events. To get more information about schools. So it truly is an information gathering experience, trying to get ready for college now, rather than, you just waiting for brochures to show up at your door, because that doesn't happen anymore.
Wow. So what do you think makes a strong application?
So this is my strongest word for this is a story.
Okay.
A story.
We love stories.
A story. Yes. Your application needs to tell a story. Mm-hmm. When I say that, I mean the dots need to connect. So I have one student I always talk about. I won't say her name, but she was accepted to, I wouldn't even say it was a school of her dreams. It was a school that wasn't even on her radar, that she didn't even think was something she could achieve. And I think about how her story made sense. So she suffered anxiety when she was making the transition between middle and high school. And her family got her a therapy dog. And this dog the dog came to school. would sit in this high school that I taught in. The dog would come, to school, lay next to her, spend the day with her. And it was such a life-changing experience for her that she decided to go train therapy dogs for other people. And so when she started thinking about going to school and what am I going to school for? I'm thinking about mental health and how I support people and what I can do down the road. So you take these dots and you connect them. I don't just choose out of the thin air that I'm going to go major in, I don't know, environmental science just because it sounds cool,
right,
or it looks cool, or, oh, I like animals. It's a different thing to be able to say, I've spent my summers caring for animals at our local zoo. I've already put in the effort and the time, and making that connection to an admissions counselor that I'm truly passionate about what I want to do. There's two things I think about when I think about why a story is so important. One, college admissions staff have to hold certain numbers, right? They have to admit students who are going to finish. They want the money, right? The money is, you're going to come, you're going to write a check, you're going to do all that. But at the end of the day, what's my graduation rate? What's my
okay,
retention
yeah,
rate, right? And so if I'm just accepting students who are coming because mom and dad said I had to go, because it
mm-hmm.
looked cool, because my girlfriend is coming to University of
Mm-hmm.
Texas or University of Florida, oh, it's warm here, I want to get away from home, that doesn't signal to me that you are passionate about your education, that you're going to put in the extra work when it gets tough. When you tell me I've been dedicating the last 2 to 3 years of my life for a certain experience or a certain goal, then that says to me, you're going to come, you're going to do the work, you're going to contribute to my community, because it's not just, I'm not just giving you a degree, right? I need you to come and I need you to connect with faculty and make my school look great by awards and honors and going out and speaking at conferences. And then as an alum who's going to give back, right? Because they're not just looking at the 4 years of dollars you're giving them, for the degree. You're going to be a successful alum and you're going to give back. That's the very first thing I think about with why that story is so important. The second thing I think about is we talked about how competitive the landscape is and how many students are applying to these schools. So that's the other thing, right? You got more students applying to school. You've got, a larger population, right? And you have students that are international that are coming in that can apply to our schools. I remember when I was in grad school, there was one of the admissions people. Now, this was a grad school. Bear with me. He was leaving to go home, and he had one of those rolly suitcases, like the carry-on suitcase. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like walking to the elevator, and I'm like, hey, I was like, are you, what's all that? Like, are you going on a trip? And he said, no, these are applications. I take this home with me, and I've got to get through these applications. It's a short period of time, right? And I'm thinking, he is not reading all of that tonight. He's going to read the right. He is not getting through all that. What he might get through is the first paragraph.
Mm.
And if
Mm-hmm.
that first paragraph and that first piece of the application is not capturing him, that
Mm-hmm.
application is going to the side and it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we can't just put out these little applications like we used to do, So
Mm-hmm.
it has to have a story. It has to have a story of initiative, of leadership, of passion, of who am I, and that I'm going to come to your school. I'm going to have a transformative experience, and I'm going to contribute back to this school in some way. And I'm going to be successful. That's what a strong college application looks like, in my opinion.
Wow. Wow. But okay, I'm going to say what I think many parents of teens might be thinking. My child is a teen and they're not passionate about much, or
Tell the
they're
truth.
not, they're not going to have like 3 years of, I volunteered here because this specific, I mean, it's hard enough to say, okay, choose a major.
Right.
Think about what career you might want to have for the next
Mm-hmm.
10, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what do we do there?
So you say it as if I'm not in the choir with you, right? I'm over
I
here
know.
with my sophomore daughter in the same bucket who doesn't even want to think about college, right? And the one thing I want to say though is don't panic, and it's not too late, right? So there's a few different things that I suggest. I think trying to work to get them excited in the subtle ways. We've had to do that, right? We had to do that with vegetables. We've had to do that with, getting your homework done, all those things. So I think there are ways to get them excited about the possibility of school. And then, and I think some of that comes with connecting them to students already so that they can see like, oh, this is what, this is what you did when you applied and, things like that. So for me, it's visiting campuses, meeting students that come when they come back from college, things like that, to try to kind of build up that interest and desire. It's not too late. I think that you can craft a story. It's going to take a little bit. And it may take some deep digging on both the parent and teen's part to say, you know what, there is a little bit of thread here. You've done this sport or this activity. What made you do that sport or activity? Is this something you can do when you get to college, intramural or professional, whatever, NCAA, whatever, to make those connections and try to build that story. But there's also other things, like there are schools that don't, they aren't as passionate about that. It may be looking at some of the smaller schools that aren't necessarily on everybody's radar. Maybe it's not, I don't know, maybe it's not UT Austin, it's, UT in a smaller place or somewhere like that, where you're going to get just as great an education, but it's not going to be as competitive. But I'll also say this, let the school tell you no. Even though your student may not feel like I can get into that school, still apply. Application fees, they can add up. You have to be mindful of that. There's ways to get waivers, but let the school tell your child no. Don't take that opportunity away from them because you don't think that their package is strong enough. Or take the time to bolster it up. There's a ton of pre-summer programs available for students at colleges that they can experience and also may help build up their interest. I know we did one this past summer for writing for my daughter. And now all of a sudden she keeps mentioning that school, school.
Yeah.
So it's not the school I necessarily wanted her to think about, but she's at least talking a little bit about college. So there's ways like that, if you can get them connected into something that's happening on a college campus. We're not going to be the ones to convince them completely. I think, like I said, you use those subtle kind of resources around you to get them to kind of build their interest and then trigger that, oh, I need to start doing these things so that I have a strong college application.
That's good advice. Now, if you need someone to you mentioned $10,000 before, but if you need someone to help you with essays, do you recommend that? Do you recommend like someone to help your student craft these essays and craft the story that you mentioned?
That's not my first recommendation. No.
Okay. What is it?
So first off, let's say we are very fortunate that we are in the age of the internet, right? So there are a ton
of ChatGPT.
Don't do that, y'all. But there are resources online to help with like crafting essays. That's just a Google search, college essay support or recommendations or things like that. There's one I follow, the college essay guy. I think he's got some pretty good tips and tricks about how to write college applications. I think that you get connected to those free groups I mentioned, the HBCU parent community. There's the Common Black College app. Has a parent community that's also on Facebook. I think there's that. I do small groups of students together, and there are a few of us out there who do that, who do those small groups, less expensive options where we're just bringing together kids to be able to connect with one another, to support each other through the journey and learn from each other. Maybe you visited, FAMU, and maybe you visited, Georgia Tech or something, and maybe we can talk about it. What did you see? What did you experience? But I don't think that the $10,000 route is the way to go first. I think that the students who need the greatest support and help really aren't in a position to pay $10,000, right? We're trying to just pay for tuition. We're trying to save up for that. So to the extent that we can use free resources, they are out there. Grab a book, get together with a group of parents that you can sit down and support and help each other through the process. What have you heard? What have you learned? I don't think that needs to be the way to go. Local sororities, actually, one of the local sororities here does college admission support and help with guiding kids through the process. And so you can reach out to them. Do you have a group? Do you have, a young mentor group that you do to be able to help students through the college application process? There's definitely other resources that we can use for that.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's good to know. So do you still think college is so expensive? Do you still think it's a good investment?
I have toyed with this question myself over the last couple of years as I look at the tuition rates rise. I think yes, with a plan. That's my
Okay.
stance on it. And what that means is that we don't get to just go to college to explore anymore. There was a
Mm.
and I say that as I'm not sure that for Black, brown families that was ever an option to just go and explore, but it's most certainly not an option now. When I look at college tuitions in state where I live, the state school, the tuition is $11,000 a year. And then that's not counting, room and board, getting them home from school, things like that. I don't think that we have the luxury to go to college and just say, I'm just going to choose a major, my junior year or my, at
Mm-hmm.
some other point because, and just learn, right? I think you really do need to say, what am I going to school for? Am I going for a major that is going to be lucrative on the end? So, am I going to school for psychology or literature? Like that's not really an option,
Art
right?
history.
Art history, right? What's the plan here? Yep. You need to get internships. You cannot go and just chill in the summer. That's not an option. One of the things I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is telling students that a college degree is enough. In truth, you still need work experience, right? And you need work experience in your field. You coming home and working at Old Navy in the summer, that's not going to cut it, right? unless that's what you're going to do, right? But that's not ideal. You need to be, your hustle needs to start with those summer internships, all 4 or all 3 summers, however many you're there, right? You need to have a plan. On average, we're still in a place where people who have a college degree will earn more on average, right? But that amount, I think it's about 160,000, but that's over the lifetime, right? So that amount is really starting to narrow. I don't think it's about the financial return on investment. I think it's about the options. I think a college degree still gives you options that someone who doesn't have one doesn't have. I think about things like, federal government jobs. They still require a bachelor's degree. It doesn't matter what that bachelor's degree is in, but they require it. Are you going to go back and get one? Is it harder for you to get one as an adult when you probably started a family or something like that? Even substitute teaching in a lot of states requires having a bachelor's degree. So can you even when you're starting to think about needing flexibility because you started a family, do you have the option of even being able to do something like that? I think there's still a level of credibility that a college degree offers that says I can learn, because that's truthfully all it comes down to, right? Is I am capable of learning information and being able to use it. I think a college degree gives you a network that, to be honest, a lot of us don't have before we get to that point. So it does give us a professional network. In a lot of ways, though, I don't think it's enough. I think that for a lot of families, a college degree is the first step. And then the graduate degree is a necessity for most fields. And so I think when I think about whether or not from a financial perspective, it's a good investment, I think you need to gun for scholarships for undergrad to make it worthwhile because you are likely going to need to go to grad school. That's the way I think about it when I think about return on investment. The one place, though, that I will say that I am seeing where I am starting to see and feel more of a waste of dollars is how you go to school. So living on campus, we've often said like, oh, you want to go live on campus so you get to, you become an adult and have to do things on your own and things like that. Living on campus, that's the piece that nobody is really talking about. Expensive. So again, I go back to my state, $11,000 in
Listen,
state. Would you?
listen. I need them to go spread their wings. Okay.
They do need to spread their wings. So here's another thing I'm seeing, and I've seen this with families who are thinking a little bit more, are thinking like forward thought, thinking about how they go away in a way that's more lucrative. So things like, should you buy a property rather than wasting money on a dorm? Does it make sense to get a small condo where they can rent out other rooms to somebody else? That to me is where I'm seeing a lot of waste. is how are you going to school? And then are you throwing away dollars with things like that? And then not being smart about how I'm coming home or when I'm coming home. That's the wasteful piece. So we need to budget college in the way that we budget the rest of our lives. And that's the way I think that we keep that we achieve kind of that return on investment. But college itself, yes, with a plan.
Okay, with a plan. HBCUs are becoming more and more competitive. Why do you think that is?
Ooh, I'm so glad.
Yes.
I am so glad. I'm glad I'm not glad. Actually, I'll take a little bit of that back. I'm going to say it why in a minute. The one thing that makes me unhappy about it. I think we are recognizing that we need that space. That as Black people, we need to be together and we need to grow from one another, that we are brilliant, we are excelling, we are achieving, and we need to build up our own self-esteem together. And it's so interesting because when I went to grad school, I went to Stanford for grad school. And one of my friends who did not attend the HBCU undergrad said to me, "You are the most comfortable person in every room." And I'm like, that's because I had 4 years of being able to be comfortable and safe. And so I don't care about these people. Like this don't care. I am going to be myself because I've been allowed to be myself in a space for 4 years. I think
and you've seen how being yourself was enough.
It was enough. It was more than enough, right? It was more than enough. And so I think we're starting to recognize that. I think we have some social media to thank for that. People are being able to see the insight and seeing the experience of being together and what that looks like. I think that we've proven it. We've proven ourselves. When I was first going to go to FAMU, one of my family members said, well, you need to learn how to operate in a space where, not everybody looks like you. And I really didn't. I was too young to really even think about it or know about it. But now, as an HBCU grad, I also see that that's the most lucrative place for us to be, right? Companies the reality is they have diversity goals, right? Hopefully they keep, I know a lot of them are pulling back their initiatives, right? But still at the end of the day, they still know that their workplace needs to look diverse, right? They may not want to say it out loud, but they also recognize that there is value in having different people in the room and at the table. And so when they're looking for, Black students, where is your biggest pie? I'm going to go to an HBCU. And so when I came out of FAMU and when I've seen other students come out of FAMU, they've come out with multiple offers. They're coming out with these connections with companies because they're getting the support. There are intentional events to help them secure job offers, to get them in front of these companies. Go to a people and ask them, when's your college fair? Nobody knows, or your career fair. Nobody knows if they're even having one that the Black students are even aware of. And so I think that we've proven ourselves. We're graduating the greater number of engineers, and then they're getting employed. We're graduating pre-med students, and they're getting fed into great med school programs. So we've done the work, and now everybody gets to see it. And so we're cashing in, and we're getting our students back. The one thing that makes me sad about HBCUs being more competitive is that there are students who don't have the grades necessarily coming out of high school, but it doesn't mean that they're not capable of being successful in college. And been exposed to a couple, they, for whatever reason, haven't gotten the support that they needed. They've been in a school where they don't get support as Black students. And so they may come out with a 2.5 or a 2.6. And I think our HBCUs still need to make space for them because there's still people that are capable, that are passionate about having a great future. They're passionate about their goals. They're passionate about having an education. But maybe along the way, they just didn't get some kind of support, or things were happening at home and they just weren't able to have what their ability reflect in their grades. And so I think we need to figure out some kind of way to keep them in our fold. Our HBCUs need to make space for that.
Yeah. So, and probably the story that you write for college admissions, a story about your journey to college, makes a big difference in those situations as well. That's important. So, what is our role to play? Our role as parents, because it's their college journey, it's their college experience. But to get them there, like what's our role?
Like today or tomorrow? Like I don't know.
Theoretically,
Theoretically,
what
right?
is our role?
The role you want to play. So yeah, this is actually something I've been dealing with myself. It's so funny. I had the young lady that I mentored. She came to visit a couple of days ago, and her mom said something about, well, I want her to do this, and I want her to do that, and I don't understand why she's not. And I said, she's not you. And then I had to pause and think, I go through the same. They're not me, right?
Exactly.
And so my child is not me. And she's going to do things differently. And I think we have to remember that their journey is their journey. It's not ours. And so that's tough, right? Because I want her life to look the way I dreamed it when she was, before she was even born. So I think there's a time when we have to figure this out. We know our kids, and it's different for every child. There's a time where we have to kind of step back and let them explore a bit. But we know when they're getting ready to burn their hand, right? And so I think that, there's that. And then there's also, I think it's helpful for us to be as knowledgeable as we need to be. We need to know how to go out and research information about schools and programs and things like that. And we can toss it up and serve it up to them. We have to figure out when it's not negotiable for them to do what we want them to do or need them to do, and when we can step back and let them explore. So I think, when I, as a parent of a high school teen, I think we try to get them involved in things that will help them build their story. I think that's some of the work that we have to do, because I'm not sure that they're thinking about it, right? I don't think that they are able at the age that they're at, for the most part, to make the connections and the dots. I think that comes later for them. But I think as parents, we can say, hey, you've been talking a lot about, I don't know, dentistry. I saw this program, or I saw this college program or something. Maybe you want to think about applying for it. And then recognize when you aren't getting through, and you might need to pull in another adult or a friend or somebody else to help kind of drive that point home, to help them build the story right now. But then also we need to recognize if they're who they are, right? We may think they're ready for college, and they may not be. And that's a hard pill to swallow, right? Because you're like, my kid is following the path that I followed. I want them to follow that, or the path that looked like the one I did, right? But maybe their path looks like going to community college for 2 years because they need that experience, which also is another way to bring down costs. Let's not forget that, to get those gen eds out the way.
Right.
But we have to recognize that their journeys may not look like ours. Be supportive. Give them the space to explore some things, make some mistakes that aren't detrimental, so that they can learn, right? And then just support them. I mean, and it's hard to say that, because support them to a point. To also say, like, like, there's sometimes that, like, if you do this, this is where it's going to hurt you down the road. I can't let you do this. And there's, like I said, there's some places where it's just non-negotiable. But I think we have to give them space. It's just not easy.
It's hard to have that balance of, it's your life, but when you mess up, it's also my life.
Right. That's the truth. The truth. Yes,
when you waste $20,000, it also hurts me.
Right.
It's hard to, when you lose that scholarship because you were out doing shenanigans.
Right.
And your GPA is 2.0.
Right.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, and I think, so that's the part where I say, there are the points where we get non-negotiable, but it's also the point of recognizing what is true, what your child truly needs, right? And being honest with ourselves. And that's not easy. Not every child is ready to go off to school. Not to be away for school, right? They may need a couple more years. They may need some more time. And I think the other thing is making sure that you are tapped into where you can keep an eye. So one of the things, back to like in college, there's FERPA. So once your student goes off to school, you don't have access to you can't get access to their grades unless they give you access to seeing their grades and their portals and things like that. And what would be helpful is to have that conversation before you get into school, right? Because
Yeah.
once they're in and they're starting to fail, they're not showing you their portals. They're not, right? But before they go, listen, I'm supporting you through school, but what I need is visibility to see your grades so I can see when you need help. Because you may not want to get help or reach out to somebody, but I can help you with that, right? But having that conversation long before you get into the place of emotion, is really helpful, because I've had parents reach out to me and say, "Hey, I popped into he needs coaching. I need some academic support, things like that." And then and that's the other role, I would say. The things that we assume that they know, they don't know. They don't know. And so, like reading a syllabus, putting their classes on their schedule, on their calendar, setting up a Google Calendar so they can see their work. It may feel like some administrative task, like you're their secretary, but it will pay off in the long run to sit with them and do those things and teach them. They're not getting that in school. And so we have to kind of fill in those gaps too, of the life skills of operating
How do you
through the
manage?
college process, right? Time management. Yeah. How do you, because your professor isn't telling you these things. What's that switch between high school and college? Do they know what the differences are in the expectations when they go to school? And again, all these things are better done before emotions enter the room. So before they go, sitting down and having those conversations. Yeah.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
How are things still changing for Black and Brown students, and Black students specifically? Because there's been, Supreme Court cases, there's been, different environments changing in college, different states that are eliminating their DEI initiatives. And how are things changing for us?
Yeah, this is also driving some of us at HBCUs. So we had the Dobbs decision reversed, the affirmative action decision was reversed. So students have to find a different way to signal that I am a Black student. And although admissions are supposed to be blind, I think that gives the admissions office some way to be able to bring students in of different backgrounds. The reality is the numbers are down. I know Harvard's numbers are down on enrollment. They didn't dip as much as they thought that they would dip. But they did dip significantly. I know Stanford's dropped quite a bit, admissions and enrollment of Black students, admissions numbers in undergrad. And the other thing that's making a big impact is states are removing legacy admissions. And that is hurting, because in a way, a lot of us went to these schools not just to have it on our own resume, but to open that door for our kids. And now that door is being closed again. And so in the Ivies and the prestigious, quote unquote prestigious schools, right? Quote unquote schools, the numbers are dropping because of having to be quote unquote colorblind in the admissions process. And this has impacted Black students and Hispanic students. Asian numbers have not dropped as much in the application process, because the reality is we don't test the scores. Our scores aren't as high on average. It's not because we aren't capable, but we know all the things that play into the role of why the testing puts us at a disadvantage. So, I think that what it says, though, to our students is the rest of your story needs to be stronger. Your leadership needs to be stronger. The rest of the package that you're bringing, the activities you've been in, the reason why you've been in those activities, not just, I signed up for this club, right? Why did you do that? All those things, and connecting those dots becomes so much more important in putting that best foot forward, if those are the schools that you want to go to, or we have a wealth of HBCUs that will better position you, in my opinion, for the future. And that's where it's hurting us. Legacy is hurting in some very unexpected ways. So California repealed their legacy admissions, but it's possible that this will spread. I was it too long ago? I went back and I did a little research. I didn't realize like Howard University uses legacy. So some of the HBCUs even use legacy in their admissions process. And so in some ways though, in that way, I think it opens up some doors for our students who may not have been able to get into Howard or get into Hampton, those private HBCUs, Spelman, things like that, because their parents weren't Spelmanites or Howard students. And so I think in that way, it helps students who didn't have that legacy chain be able to be admitted. It's tough. Yeah. It's been tough for us, you know, and I think that's contributing to us deciding to go to HBCUs where we are welcomed and celebrated.
Right. Let's talk about some of the things that we don't often talk about. Students with disabilities. What are some of the additional considerations that they have to think about when thinking about college?
Yep. So I'll go back to start early. This has to start early. And so let's separate the two, right? You've got physical disabilities and mobility challenges, and then learning differences and learning challenges. So physical disabilities, things like that, you know, there's laws in place, obviously with ADA, things like that. It doesn't, just because a building is accessible doesn't mean it's safe. Right. And so when I think about that, like I think about the fact that the ramps are often in the back of the buildings. So you open up students for assault, things like that. And so this really does, like, you've got to start early. If that's something that is on your mind, exploring the campus. Are there disability services that are available? Every college has an office for disability and accommodation. So do they offer rides to campus, to class? You know, what mobility services do they have? Do they have dorm rooms that are accessible, safely accessible? Where are the classrooms? Where are the ramps? What are the pathways? Does it mean my child is going to need to get to, you know, be on campus or leave for class 30, 40 minutes earlier even to be able to navigate? And then the other thing is, are there virtual class offerings? Because maybe that's a different way for a student with physical disabilities to be able to manage that. And especially if it's something like, you know, a student who has like POTS or something where they have flare-ups, lupus, things like that, so they can continue to stay engaged and be able to get to class and or have accommodations with their professors. On the other side was learning differences. So I mentioned every school has a center of disabilities, have a student support center. And I don't know that a lot of parents know that is offered on college campuses, where they have tutoring, free tutoring for students. They help to devise an accommodation plan. They may allow a student to go do testing in a testing center that is quiet and away from other students. They have different technologies for students that have dyslexia or dyscalculia or dysgraphia. And so it's, again, going early, going to visit campuses, asking those questions. If your student has an IEP, you want to keep it and document it, and especially right now with, you know, different states, and they all have different rules and interpretations of students' IEPs and the potential for the dismantle of Department of Ed. You absolutely want to document, you know, your IEPs that you've had in the past. Where has the accommodation been supportive? How has it helped? When the accommodation wasn't in place, what was happening with your student? What were they experiencing? Any official diagnoses, things like that. A lot of people they shy away from having an official diagnosis. Having an official diagnosis is like, it's clutch for when that child is getting ready to do testing. Because you can get accommodations for the SAT, ACT as well. I'm not sure if everybody, like, people know that if your child has a testing accommodation for an IEP, you can get testing accommodations for SAT, ACT. You have to start that process about a year early. But college
is it just time, like extra time, or what kind of accommodations are available?
You can get extra time. You can get moved to a different space. Okay. So that you're not distracted by other students in the room. SAT is fully digital now. But if you have a student who needs to be pen and paper, that they can do that now the SAT is completely calculator. At one point, there were sections where you couldn't use a calculator, but if a student had an accommodation for a calculator, they would still be able to use a calculator. And then like things like large print for students who need that, Braille, things like that, they can do those types of accommodations as well. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the schools can do it as the same, right? But they need the diagnosis and the information. This also comes back to FERPA. Your child has to initiate any accommodation requests. And so helping them learn to advocate for themselves, go back to the role we have to
Yes.
play, that they have to advocate for themselves, not just in requesting those accommodations, but ensuring that those accommodations are met throughout their time in school. Because
Yes.
some professors are like, whatever, you're here in school, yada, yada. No, I have an accommodation and I need to take this test in a quiet space. That they need to know how to do that. Absolutely.
That's important.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you homeschool yourself? How do you stay up on all of this for college? Because it seems like every year something else changes, something else, needs to be learned. And what do you recommend for parents to homeschool themselves in the college admissions process?
Yeah. First, I go back to starting early, but also not starting necessarily with the intention of an application. So what I mean by that is saying you have a child who's 8th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade, visit campuses. Don't wait, and you don't have to visit campuses and go to the admissions office and set up an interview. Some of it is just going to
Just go get
campus.
some merch.
Go get some merch. Walk around the bookstore. You'd be surprised what you learn from just the bookstore. Is it inclusive? I was shocked. I went to one bookstore and they had hair scarves and do-rags, and I was like, listen, this is a sign though that you recognize you have students of color who have needs, who can't get off campus, things like that. So visit the campus, talk to a student who's walking by. What class are you taking? Where are you headed? Like all these, what's it like being here? Visit campus. Visit campuses when you're on vacation. It does not need to be an additional expense. Just stop and talk. College fairs. So churches and communities offer college fairs. Schools put on college fairs. Don't wait. Go visit. You can talk to an admission counselor there. What's going on? What's different? What challenges are you all facing this year? What are the students like? How have they changed over the last couple of years? Just ask. Just ask. They'll talk to you. Get a card. Keep in touch, and follow up and have that contact there. There are, I mentioned there's parent groups on Facebook. You don't need to be a senior right now that you can join. HBCU Parent Scholarship Community, Common Black College Application Group. Jump in and just see what's happening. There are college representatives that I don't need right now, but I know their names. I know they give out scholarships. I know they give out scholarships to students at the last minute who are looking for a place to go. And so I don't need to wait till my daughter's senior year to figure that out. I know who they are now and I'm following them. One of them just moved to another school and I know he gives money and he finds a way for students. And so get locked in there. There are books. There is a great book, The Black Family's Guide to Admissions. It's by a couple of men from Morehouse who wrote that with a specific focus on Black and brown families. So that's another great way that we just continue to learn. And then social media. For all the bad things and bad raps that it gets, there are people I follow on Instagram. There's a woman, I think, Debt-Free Tea. Every morning she just posts from her car with her cup of coffee or tea, and she's just talking about scholarships. So that kind of keeps me looped in on what's coming out, what the timing looks like for these scholarships, what are the things that my daughter's going to need in order to put together a great scholarship package. The other thing I would say is, you do your own reading, you do your own research, get connected to parents. This is not so much for a learning, but because it's important, go meet your student's counselor freshman year. Set up a meeting. One, that way they'll know that your child is college bound and they know to get you information and can send it to you so that you are hearing what's going on. They can put you on their newsletter, things like that, because they don't just do it automatically. They don't just send it to everybody. And that way you can stay up to date on any updates that they get, any scholarship lists that they have that might be specific to the school. But the other thing is, I mentioned, so they know your child is college bound. When students get to high school, there's tracks. Not every student is on a college bound track. That's not the expectation anymore. I'm not sure if it ever was. It wasn't my high school. I'm not sure if that was the case where everybody goes, but there are tracks. So your counselor needs to know so that they can advise your child to be on a college-bound track. Where that would deviate is things like 4 years of math, 2 years of the same foreign language, things like that. they need to know so that they make sure that your student meets the requirements. But also they need to know so that, like I said, when they are choosing students for college fairs, because that's what it is, when they're choosing students to go to college fairs, when they're choosing students to be in front of admissions people who are visiting, they know your child wants to attend college.
Right.
And that keeps that information flow open. The other thing is subscribe to all the things like FAFSA, for the FAFSA application. Go ahead and sign up for their web page, for their Facebook page, so that you get the updates on what's happening, so that you know when the dates are changing to be able to submit applications. Most states have a college foundation. Subscribe to it. Go on, they have a Facebook page or they have a website. Go sign up for their newsletter. Continue to get that information fed into your inbox so that you're always in the loop about what's happening. And then the last thing is some of the official research places. So, and this is a blessing that came out of the pandemic, if you're going to say it like that. There are always virtual events that colleges are hosting. So you can go online and sign up for virtual admissions. And it doesn't have to be a school you're thinking about. Just go listen, and they will give you information about what's happening. And then the last thing is the common data set. And I do go out and look at those from time to time for different schools. Every school has a common data set. It's like their raw data of what's the GPA for a student to be, our average GPA, what our diversity numbers look like, what our graduation rate is, what our retention rate is, number of students who needed academic support. It's a huge thing, and they're required by law to file it every year. If you want to go find it, like for Georgia Tech, for example, you go search Georgia Tech Common Data Set, you'll get it. It's a big PDF. Just go out and read the ones for your state, even any schools that you're looking at, and it'll just give you some information and insight into what the schools are looking like.
I love that. I heard you speak once, and you said to become BFFs with your high school counselor, because you need to be. They have a lot of people to serve, and your child needs to be in that mix and not forgotten.
No, people don't realize when you fill out the Common App for college, the person who does your child's recommendation is the counselor. Most students have never even, if they haven't gotten in trouble for something, they don't know their counselor. When have they ever met with them? And so how does that counselor fill out a positive recommendation for your child and not know
That's
you
useful,
or not know them? Right, or know them. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Know them.
So tell me some of the things that you offer for parents that are, in this process with their teens, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my company, Beacon Education Group, we do a couple of things. Every year we host a free parent webinar in August before families are headed back to school. And it is open for all grades. And truthfully, I would prefer to see 9th, 10th, and 11th graders than seniors, because as I mentioned, August is almost too late, right? And it is free. We advertise it on our Facebook page. So if you go to Facebook Beacon Education Group, it's there. You can also find out information about it on our website, which is www.beaconeducationgroup.com. So that is a great way for families to get information, and we share everything from admissions process to financial aid tips to scholarship information. You can also sign up for my mailing list on my website. And then also, I do a college navigator program. Now, right now I'm in the mix with finishing up the seniors. They have gotten their college applications in. Yay! It was a pull. Because they're all so busy and things like that. But we're drafting scholarship essays because scholarship season is coming up, and essays need to be at the ready. So that's what we're doing right now. So you can also learn about that on Beacon Education Group to sign up for that. And we do that for 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders.
Lovely. I will put all this information in the show notes, and I'll also link to the books that you mentioned and the essay person that you mentioned, and anything else you want to send me so that I can share with our parents. That would be amazing, and I'll put that in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Shaquita.
You're welcome. You are welcome. This was a joy.
I'm so thankful for Shaquita's knowledge and wisdom in this area. There's definitely a lot to learn as we prepare our kids for next steps. What did you learn from this episode? I would love to know. Email me at podcast at wokehomeschooling.com. Until next time, I'll learn something today.
Homeschool Yourself is a production of Woke Homeschooling, Inc. For show notes and links to things mentioned in the episode, visit wokehomeschooling.com/podcast. Woke Homeschooling empowers parents to teach their kids an inclusive, truthful history. We invite you to visit our website and download a sample of the history curriculum we offer for kids. Visit us at wokehomeschooling.com.